Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koe te māngai o te whare. I would like to start by just reminding the House of the title of this bill when it was first introduced. And it was called the Financial Assistance for Live Organ Donors Bill. And now it's called the Compensation for Live Organ Donors Bill. And what I would like to do is to congratulate Chris Bishop, because I know he sat on all of the Select Committee hearings, and I know that there were others involved in the Financial Assistance for Live Organ Donors Bill, but actually Chris is responsible for the Compensation for Live Organ Donors Bill. And that's actually a significant point, because I want to acknowledge his leadership in working with the Health Select Committee. And I think it's really important, because other people have said that this has come from others, but actually the bill that we have before us didn't come from anyone else. It came from a lot of hard work and focus by the member in charge of the bill. I'd like to reference a Stuff article I've just seen, actually. It's dated the 5th of July 2014. And it had a lot of comments from a 27-year-old called Matt Hill, who donated to his 68-year-old grandmother, Sharon. And Sharon was receiving dialysis and had been told, actually, that if she couldn't find a donor, that she was going to pass away. And Matt put up his hand and he said, this was what was quoted in the article, that it was his good deed. He didn't have any kids, and this was an opportunity to pay back to his grandparents, who had given him so much. But he noted that he was being paid $206.21 per week by WINS, and that didn't cover half his mortgage. And so his grandparents assisted him through that process, and that instigated Sharon writing to Minister Ryle, who actually referenced a bill that Cam Calder had in the ballot. And that was the Financial Assistance for Live Organ Donors Bill. And it noted that the proposition of that bill was to pay 80% of a person's wage. So essentially it was about treating donors as having an accident and going through our ACC system. And so, as you can see from the iteration of the beginnings of that bill in the House today, we have moved so far away from the proposition that this is an accidental relationship between a donor and the person who receives that donation. I actually want to talk about the relevance of this piece of legislation to different parts of our society and our community. So I found some statistics from a discussion paper titled Ethnic, Cultural and Religious Differences to Organ Donation. And so in 2015, there were 442 people who needed an organ donation, who needed a kidney actually. Of those, 170 were European, and Europeans are 64.4% of our population, and 38.5% of those needing a kidney. Māori, 93 needed a kidney, 16.6% of the population, 20% of the people needing a kidney. Pacific, 108, 7.3% of the population, 24.4% of those needing a kidney. Asian, 63, 9% of the population, or 14.3% of people needing a kidney, and the other was 3, and they're 2.3% of the population and 0.7% needing kidneys. Now, corresponding to that were those who have actually donated. And so of the 273 donations that were noted in that particular document, Europeans, 218, 80% of donors, Māori, 29, 11% of donors, Pacific, 9, 3% of donors, Asian, 10, 3.5% of donors, and other, 7, or 2.5%. So the relevance of this piece of legislation to Māori and Pacific communities actually cannot be underestimated. And I don't think we've really focused on that this is a piece of legislation that is going to disproportionately provide, I think, better opportunities for our Māori and Pacific members of our society. Now, what's the relevance of that? Well, organ donation kidney organ donation in 2014, there were 139 kidney donations. Of those, 72 were live donors, or 52%. So the reason I highlight these statistics is because I think they're really important now, engaging with our Māori and Pacific communities who disproportionately need these live kidney donations. And so I think by removing the financial barrier and financial burden, it's going to provide more opportunity, I think, for live donations from our Māori and Pacific communities. I think we're going to see a significant increase because a lot of the barrier has been financial, and in fact, the American Society of Transplantation and the American Society of Transplant Surgeons created an incentives workshop group in 2015, and in fact that was their biggest finding, that the financial burden of organ donation was the biggest disincentive. So congratulations to the House, we've addressed that issue. The other thing that they highlighted though was that careful consideration and testing of potential financial incentives for organ donation should have also been considered, and they estimated that out-of-pocket expenses averaged about $5,000. And that's for transportation, lodging, childcare, lost wages. Now, we haven't gone that far. I think that ethically, compensating people was seen as the line in the sand, but potentially that is something that we all should be keeping an eye out for in terms of its relevance. I am part of Diabetes Awareness Month, so for the last 3 weeks I've been stepping every day to try initially to be part of a fitness challenge, and I've managed to do that. That has become part of the Finals Week challenge, and so I'm part of a group called Join the Movement, and I've got my Fitbit, and at the moment I'm averaging about over 25,000 steps a day. And the reason that I put my hand up and said, with actually Minister Coleman and Minister Lotalinga and my colleague Jacinda Ardern, the reason that I put my hand up and said, yes, I want to be part of this issue, is because over 260,000 New Zealanders have diabetes. That's a heck of a lot of New Zealanders. 59% European and other, 16% Māori, 12% Pacific, non-Indian Asian 7%, and then Indians 6%. And the relevance of those statistics actually replicate in some ways the relevance of this piece of legislation. And what we've been trying to do is to highlight how we can address the issue of diabetes in New Zealand. And the best way to mitigate diabetes is actually to get moving, is to do your steps, do some exercise. And what I've read just recently, Mr. Speaker, is an article in the British Medical Journal that says after you eat, you should walk between 5 and 15 minutes. Now, I think culturally, and some of our natural inclination is to eat and have a moi. Some people eat and have a cigarette, but actually what we should be doing is eating and walking. And if you eat and walk for 5 to 15 minutes, what it does, and actually maybe Mr. Shane Vetty can explain the biology, but we've got to decrease the blood sugar level, and the best way to do that is to get the body moving and actually processing the food that we've just eaten. So I've actually changed my habits through doing this Fitbit challenge. So now when I eat, I'll walk for either 5 to 15 minutes. And so that's one of the things that I've now integrated into my routine. The other part of it is about making healthy choices. And so I wouldn't normally do a commercial for a business, but Pitapit have joined Diabetes New Zealand, and it's all about making healthy choices. And so they now have a range of products, diabetes products, so that when people go into their shop and they want to eat better, they actually have some guidance that says, if you're a diabetic, these are the best diabetic options for you. And so what I'm hoping is through pieces of legislation like this, Mr. Bishop, it's actually going to create the space for a lot more conversation about how we prevent needing donors in the first place. because we want a healthy society, we want a well society, and we want people who have got information so they can make informed decisions about how they live their lives. So my final mihi to the Diabetes New Zealand whānau, thank you for all the work that you do. I really appreciate it, because by involving me, you've actually provided an opportunity for me to get some information and to actually change my life. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Dr. Shane